They ride on broomsticks, wear pointed hats, cast evil spells. Just a few of the ideas that most of us have about witches. But thousands of Americans consider themselves modern-day witches, and they do little to live up to those preconceptions about witches. Cerridwen Fallingstar is here to tell us more about being a witch. She's written a book called The Heart of the Fire. It's a novel, but it's a little bit more, too. We'll talk about the book in just a second. You must obviously get met with a great deal of skepticism when somebody says, "You're a witch?" What is a witch today? What does that mean?
A witch is someone who practices a form of Celtic European shamanism. That's very similar to what the Native American people did here and still do in this country. It has to do with the worship of the earth, the cycles of the seasons. We see God as both God and goddess, both male and female, and worship accordingly.
It has a great deal of negative implications, at least in this day and time when we see satanic cults and animal sacrifice and that sort of thing. Obviously you try to distance yourself, I would assume, from that.
Right. We have nothing to do with Satanism, and we never have. It's a very, very old religion, probably 50, 60,000 years of people basically worshiping the cycles of the seasons and goddess and god as they best understood it. Satan is a Christian heresy, so it's just a totally different thing. We do no animal sacrifice. That's just never has been a part of our tradition.
I'm curious, do you become a witch? Do you decide for yourself that I'm a witch or a warlock or whatever they are, or is it something that you think you're born with? How does that all work?
No, it's just like any other spiritual path. You decide that that's what calls to your heart, and you decide to follow that path. There's nothing. Some witches are psychic, but many do not consider themselves particularly psychic, so that's not the deciding factor.
Tell us about this book, The Heart of the Fire. What is the book about?
That book it's a historical novel that is about witchcraft in 16th century Scotland. Now that was the Renaissance, and during that time the burning times started. The persecutions had already been underway in Europe for quite some time, and they spread to Scotland and became very difficult and dangerous there. So it's during that time period where people were shifting over from the old pagan ideas, which were that bodies were good and that God was in everything, in you, in me, in the plants, in the animals. And they started coming out of that idea and seeing, well, gee, maybe sex isn't good, and maybe women are these terrible temptresses who pulled, us out of the Garden of Eden. And some of the dominant Christian theology at that time was very anti-body and anti-female. So the witches, who were very pro-body and pro-female, were seen as being dangerous to the status quo and were attacked for that reason.
Do you find that people who do not believe in witches and witchcraft, is there something that they can understand, something that they can get from this book?
Oh yes, I hope a lot of people will read the book, because it's a lot easier than going to the library and looking up all these historical sources to find out, well, what was really happening then. This way they can read a fun, interesting book and really understand what the forces at work were. And it's very relevant to today, because just 50 years ago you had all these Jews killed in Germany. The persecutions unfortunately have not stopped. So it's a lesson that we have not yet learned about, is not scapegoating other people and destroying them because for whatever reason, for what they believe or what you even think that they believe that they probably don't believe.
Cerridwen Fallingstar has written a book called The Heart of the Fire. And we appreciate you being here and joining us today. Thanks for telling your story.
Now we'll go to